Hello and welcome to the Margot Trousers Sewing Workshop. These are a lovely pair of loose-fitting tracksuit trousers and they have nice deep pockets and sit nice and high on the waist and can either be made in a jersey, organic cotton jersey like this one, or more of a sweatshirting fabric. You just got to make sure your fabric has a little bit of stretch to it. I love these trousers for hanging out around the house or exercising, doing yoga, that kind of thing. And I'm really excited to be sewing with you guys today. So all you need to make these trousers is a sewing machine and some fabric, and then it's a good idea to have some elastic for the waistband. So either 3 centimeter, 4 centimeter wide elastic will do the trick. In order to begin, you want to grab your pattern, which we either sell like this or as a PDF, which you can download and print at home, and open it up. And inside you'll have the instruction booklet and the pattern pieces. So we're going to start by opening up the instruction booklet and skip along to page 4. And you will find the body measurement chart. This is how we're going to work out what size we want to make. So grab a tape measure and you want to measure both your hip and your waist. So your hip is the widest point of your bum, and make sure that the tape measure is nice and parallel to the floor and measure around like so. And then your waist is roughly where the waistband is sitting on me. So it's around the belly button, something like that. It's also a good idea to measure your inside leg, which goes from your ankle to your crotch. Our patterns are designed for an average height of 5'5" or 164 centimeters tall. And that has a 78 centimeter inside leg. So if you're taller or shorter than that, I'll explain how to alter the pattern so that you get just the right fit for you. So once you have your measurements, come and have a little look at the body measurement chart and find which size you're closest to. Today I'm going to make a size 10. All right, once we know your size, we can cut out the pattern. So give yourself a little bit of space, clear the table, move some machines out the way. Let's open up the pattern. So this pattern has 2 pieces to it. So I'm going to cut out this one first, and then I'll open up this one once I've got a bit more space and cut out that one. The thing you need to look out for is the key, which is this bit here. And find your size on the key and then see which type of line corresponds with it. And then you want to find those lines on the pattern and you're just going to cut all the way around. Super simple. All of the patterns are named after someone I know. So in this collection we've got the Della leggings, which is named after my friend Isabella Della Porta, which I think is one of the best names ever. And then we've got the Margot Trousers, which is named after Penny's little daughter. Then we've got the Zara jumper, which is named after my friend Nobahar's mum. We've got the Kezia top, which is named after my friend Hannah's sister. And what's the other one? We've got the Lottie top and bra, which is named after my friend Lottie. So yeah, I normally name them after someone who I've either been chatting to at the time of designing them, or sometimes I just find a name that I absolutely love of someone that I know and think, oh, perfect, I'll use that for my next pattern. Some people like to trace off their size rather than cutting into the main pattern. If you know you're going to be making this garment for other people that are different sizes from you, so you know you want to make it in lots of different sizes, then you might want to trace it off onto some tracing paper and then just cut out that version. So you always keep this one as your like master version, which stays the same. I'm just gonna grab the trouser leg pieces and show you this little line here that's the lengthen and shorten line. So if you're taller than 5'5" and you want to lengthen the pattern, you would simply cut along this line, lengthen the leg, and then just grab a little scrap bit of paper, stick it in there, and then you've lengthened the leg basically. If you're shorter than 164 centimeters in height, you can just either cut or fold it up like this to make it slightly shorter, and then you would just smooth out that curve. So you wouldn't cut the pattern so that it has a glitch in it like that. You'd just smooth the leg out evenly on both sides. Let's grab our fabric. I'm going to use the red, and so this fabric is already on the fold. As you can see, I've got the 2 salvages here. So this way I can cut out 2 pieces at once. So if you grab your little instruction booklet, which is hiding under here, and you open it up to page, I think it's page 6. Yeah. You'll see some lay plan options. So you can use this as a guide. However, if you've got a different width of fabric, depending on what size you're making, you might want to find a better way of jigsawing them together. But this is your basic guide to start with. So it's a good idea to remember piece D is cut on the fold, and that's this symbol here. And that means this edge, you need to line up exactly with the fold of the fabric. And that way you cut one long piece once it's opened out. There we go, that looks good. And then got piece E up there. Okay, I'm happy with that. It's a good idea to have a little look at your grain lines and make sure that they are parallel to the edge of the fabric, to the selvage edge. So your grain lines are these arrows here, and you want to make sure that they are parallel to the edge of the fabric. In order to check that, just grab your tape measure and measure. So that's 25 centimeters to the edge there, and 25 centimeters to the edge there. If it was like this, it would measure 33 centimeters there, and I would know it's not parallel. So I just want to make sure that those two distances are measuring the same. And then grab some pattern weights. You can use anything you like for this that has a bit of weight to it. Rocks, shells, crystals, beans, tins of beans. And lay these out, and then grab your pins, and you're just gonna pin them all in place. So that is all of our pieces cut out. Get rid of our little scraps to the side, and we'll do some tests for our stitching on those in a minute. Roll this guy back up. And then it's a good idea to just take a look at all your little notches and mark those in by doing a little tiny snip into the fabric. You want to make sure your snip is less than ½ centimeter. So I'm going to snip that there. Done some slightly wonky cutting there, so I'm just going to neaten that up. Get rid of those bits. Got any notches over here? Oh yeah. So these ones you just cut into the fold a tiny bit. Same thing there. Got some notches there. All right, team, let's unpin all of our pattern pieces, and then we can start sewing. Machines at the ready. Now, you can make this whole garment on a normal domestic sewing machine. However, if you have an overlocker, you're going to want to get that out as well. I'm going to demonstrate different bits on both so you can see how they both work. But anything I do on the overlocker, you can also do on this machine with a zigzag stitch. So before we start working on the pieces that we've cut out, you're just going to grab a little scrap that you've got left over and come to your machine and try out a couple of your different stretch stitch options. So most domestic machines will have at least a normal zigzag stitch, which I'll demonstrate for you here. And that looks a little something like that, and it still allows the fabric to stretch, and it holds it nice and firm, you can see when I open it out. And then the other one that we do for stretch fabrics is a 3-step zigzag. And that looks something like that. And that allows the fabric to stretch even more, which is great. And it's also really nice and strong when you open it out. So have a little play around with your machine. And if you want to put a stretch needle on, that might help too. If you've got a twin needle, you could try that. Or if you've got an overlocker and you know how to use it, get that threaded up. That's going to be your friend today. So once we are happy with what stitch we want to use, just grab your first few pieces, and we're going to begin with piece A, which is the front trouser, and we're going to make the pockets. So we also need piece C, which is that piece. And I'm going to start by taking piece A, opening it out, so we've got our 2 legs, and we want the right side of the fabric facing us. The right side normally looks a little bit more ribbed on a jersey, but basically you just choose whichever side you like the look of more and make that the right side. And then we're going to grab our pocket pieces, which look like this. And can you see this diagonal line here? We're going to match that up with a diagonal line on our trouser piece. Get some pins. There should be a nice little notch at the bottom of the diagonal which you can match up. And just pop a couple of pins to hold it in place. I think 3 will do. And then you always want to do the same thing on the other side as well. So we're doing right side down and matching up those 2 diagonals and then just pinning in place. Nice one. I'm going to demonstrate this on the overlocker, but if you don't have an overlocker, simply do it on your zigzag machine. All I'm going to do is sew straight down where we just pinned, and our seam allowance is 1.5 centimeters. And when you do this, you want to try and not stretch out the fabric too much. Okay, so that is what an overlock looks like. You'll recognize it from a lot of your ready-to-wear garments, I imagine. And then same thing other side. Awesome. And then trim away any thread that you don't need. And this is the one and only moment I think we're going to use the iron. All right, so we've sewn that diagonal. Now we're going to flip the pocket bag back so it looks something like this, and we're just going to press it really nice and smooth so that the pocket bag is towards the back of the trouser. You can use a little bit of steam for this if you want, if you've got a steamy iron. If you're using cotton, you should be fine with quite a hot iron. Same thing both sides, so just folding it to the back and then giving it a really gentle, nice little press. If you don't have an iron, just use your warm up your hands like this, and then just use your fingertips, and you won't get it as flat, but the fabric will understand what you're trying to tell it to do, which is fold to the back. Grab your machine, make sure you're set up for a straight stitch, and then we're going to straight stitch, or top stitch you might call it, on top of where we've just sewn and pressed. So this is to make sure that you don't get that annoying thing, you know, when your pocket bag hangs out like that. We don't want that. So by doing this stitch here, it just keeps the pocket bag in all the time, which we like. So I'm going to do it about 1/2 centimetre from the fold that I've just sewn. And you really don't want to stretch this out too much as you sew it. So a trick that someone once taught me is if you watch what I'm doing at the back here, it helps to avoid it stretching out. So I'm just almost pushing the fabric in as I sew it. Seems a bit counterintuitive, but somehow it seems to help. So there you go, you've got a nicely top stitched pocket bag opening. Same thing on the other side. So we've got our top stitched pocket bag opening. We're now gonna, if I lay this out flat, you should be able to see. We're now going to fold our pocket bag in half, and hopefully you should see the pocket bag starting to take shape. I'm just going to pin those bottom edges. So we've just folded the pocket bag in half and I'm pinning the bottom edges. I'm not pinning them to the trouser leg because we don't want to attach it to the trouser leg. I'm just pinning them to each other, and then you'll see when I flip it over, we've created the place where your hand goes into the pocket. So I'm just going to sew that, and you can use a straight stitch, a zigzag stitch, an overlock, whatever you want for this. I don't mind too much. I think I might stick with a straight stitch, but yeah, whichever you want. Nice. So that's the bottom of the pocket bag sewn. And then we just need to do almost like a holding stitch or a basting stitch. So get it all laying out nicely. Great, so can you guys see there's a little notch in the top of the pocket here? That is where you want your fold to be at the top. I'm gonna trim these threads. And I'm just gonna pop a couple of pins in there like that. And then same thing on this side. We want this all sitting nice and smooth and flat and beautiful. And then a couple of pins in there like that. Now, we're gonna do a straight stitch just to hold those in place. This stitch will be hidden later. So you wanna do it nice and close to the edge of the fabric, maybe like 1/2 centimetre. And you can stop when you get to that notch. You don't need to go all the way up on that side. And then let's do the top bit where we pinned. Wonderful. So there, you can see in the space of about 10 minutes, we have just made a beautiful, deep, lovely pocket. If you want, you can give it another little press to make sure it's sitting flat, and then just do the same thing on both sides. Then we're going to sandwich these two front pieces together, right sides together, and we're going to pin the front crotch. So that's that curve from there to there. We're just going to pin that guy. And come to your machine, and with this you either want to zigzag it or overlock it, whatever you've got, go for it. I'm going to do a zigzag just so you guys can see a range of stitches. I think that's quite helpful. Remembering the seam allowance is back to 1.5 now, guys. All right, that is our front crotch done. Can you see we've got a pair of trousers coming together here? Now we're going to get some other pieces involved. We want to get our back leg pieces. We want to make sure that they are right sides together. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to sew the crotch. So that's from here to here, just that curve. You can pin it if you want. I'm just going to go for it. Wonderful. That is our back crotch sewn up, you can see. And now we're going to attach the two together. So if I move this up, I'm going to lay these on top of each other like a nice little tracksuit sandwich. And I've got right sides together. And then I'm just going to pin all the way down the side seams. Make sure everything's laid out really flat as you're doing it. If you've got your garment all like this, it's much harder to pin it nicely. So just clear a little bit of space on your table and get it all laid out nice. And then while I'm here, I'm going to pin the inside leg as well, because we can sew that at the same time. So I'm going to get my crotch seams and match them up. I'm going to send one seam allowance one way and one the other way. Hopefully you guys can see that there. And then pin those down. And then I'm just going to go all the way down both the legs. Okay, we're ready to go. Same thing as before. If you've got an overlocker, use it. If you haven't, just jump back on your normal machine and make sure it's set up for zigzag. And then we're just gonna stitch everywhere we just pinned. And keep your pocket bag sitting nice and flat so that this bit doesn't get caught up as you sew. So keep that out of the way. Seam allowance is 1.5, and you want to hide that little straight stitching that you did in the seam allowance. All right, that's one leg done. Same thing on the other side. I'm now sewing the inside leg seam, so I'm going to go all the way up one side and then all the way down the other side. Okay team, so we've sewn up our inside leg and our outside leg, which means we've got something that vaguely looks like a pair of trousers, which is exciting. If I turn them the right way around, y'all can see. They're coming together, look at that. So now we're just gonna need to do some cuffs for the bottom and a waistband for the top. I think I will start with the waistband. You can do it either way round, but if we grab our waistband piece, which is this long piece, and we fold it in half lengthways like this, and I'm just gonna sew this short edge, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew about just over halfway up, and then I'm going to leave a gap for my elastic, and then I'm going to sew another little 1.5 centimeters at the bottom. So let me show you how I do this. Pop a couple of pins in. And your seam allowance is still 1.5 centimeters, and you want to make sure you're on a straight stitch. So I've just started with a little back stitch there, and then I'm sewing about halfway up and doing a nice little back stitch so it's really strong. And then I'm skipping a section because that will leave a nice opening for our elastic, and then just sewing and again back stitching at the bottom. So if I trim those threads and hold this up, you guys can see. It should look something like that. And then this little hole here is where we thread our elastic in a minute. Now we need our trousers, and I'm going to turn them back inside out for this because I think it's easier that way. And taking our waistband, we're going to fold the whole thing in half the other way this time. So we got something that looks like this, and you can imagine it's going to go on top like that. So where we've got our little opening and our seam, we're going to put that on the center back seam of the trouser, and you want to make sure the opening is on the inside once it's sewn. So if I turn this around, you guys can see. So if I pin it like this, I know that once I've sewn it there, that'll flip up, and then the opening will be on the inside of the trouser. Making sure it's not twisted. You should have some notches at the center front, and you can match those up with the center front seam of the trouser. Pop a pin in there, and then if I hold it like this, you guys should be able to see what's going on. So I'm just popping the waistband in, pinning it in quite regular intervals. Don't need these threads anymore, so I'm going to get rid of those. I need to get better at trimming my threads as I go. Always get left with loads of scraggly ends. Awesome. And then I would recommend a couple more pins in this section just to make sure your pocket is all sitting nicely. All right, so that's all pinned nicely. Now we're going to sew it. And before we do, it's a good idea to grab your elastic. So yeah, 3 or 4 centimeter elastic is great. And it's a good idea just to take your elastic and line it up so you can see how big you want your channel for the elastic to be, and therefore how big you want your seam allowance to be. So if you're using 4 centimeter wide elastic, if that's what you've got, you want to sew with a seam allowance about 1 centimeter wide. If you're using 3 centimeter elastic, like this one, you'd pop that in, and then you've got more like a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So what should I use? I will use this one, the 3 centimeter one, to demonstrate for you guys. So I'm just going to keep that nearby so I can refer to it when I start sewing. And get my pin pot. So I'm just laying that elastic down so I can see what's going on in terms of width, and then take my first pin out, and I'm going to do a zigzag stitch for this and start sewing. And I'm going to keep this here actually because it's quite a helpful guide. So I'm not sewing the elastic down, I'm just using it as a guide for width. Once you feel like you've got your eye in for the seam allowance, you can take the elastic out of the way and just keep sewing. Nice one. That is our waistband on. Well done, team. So you can see, just check you're happy with how everything's sitting, get rid of any of these guys. And now we can put our elastic in. If you wanted to, you could trim that seam allowance away or overlock it if you've got an overlocker. I'm just going to leave it for now. Elastic. If you grab your little booklet and turn it back to page 4, you'll see this finished garment measurement chart. And the top line has waist and underneath a little, in brackets, elastic. So this is roughly the length of elastic you'll need for your size. Bearing in mind there's about a 3 centimetre seam allowance in here. So I'm making a size 10. So I want about 71 centimetres of elastic. So if you grab your tape measure and measure yourself the amount that you need, it's about there. Before you cut it, you just want to find your length, wrap it around you, check that you're happy with the fit, and bear in mind you don't want it too tight so that you feel like you can't breathe, but you also don't want it too loose that you feel like they're going to fall down. So find that sweet spot in the middle, trim it once you're happy, and then we're going to thread our elastic through that waistband we've just created. So in order to do this, you want to find yourself a safety pin, pin the end of the elastic, like so, and then find that little hole that we left ourselves as an opening, which is here, and we're going to thread the elastic in. And there's no rush in this bit, you just kind of got to take your time, pull in the elastic through. So I'm just using that metal safety pin to hold onto, and then I can shimmy it down the channel all the way around. And the channel should be a nice fit because we lined up our elastic as we were sewing it. One thing you've got to make sure is that you don't lose the end. So I'm going to do one more pull, like that. And then I'm going to put a pin in the end so that that doesn't go shooting into the channel, and then work the rest of the way around. This is a really useful tip to know if you ever lose a drawstring in a pair of tracksuits. This is how you fix it. You just got to get yourself a safety pin and re-thread it all the way around. Trying not to twist it as you go, so keeping the safety pin the same way all the way round, until eventually your little safety pin pops out the other side. And I would recommend just pinning the two ends of elastic together like so for a moment, and just double checking that it's not twisted before you sew it. So work it really evenly all the way around, and just make sure there's no twists in that elastic. Feel all the way along, because you can feel the twists and you can probably see them as well. But I think we're good to sew. So I'm going to pull it out a little bit more, unpin it, come to my machine. You can do this with a zigzag or a straight stitch. I think I'm going to do a straight stitch. And remember, you've got that seam allowance in 1.5 in total. Make sure the elastic's nicely lined up. And I'm going to go back and forth, back and forth. So I just went back and forth a few times there to make it really strong. We don't want that stitching coming undone. And then it disappears into that hole. And if you're feeling fancy, you can grab a needle and thread and sew that up by hand, or you can do just some lines of straight stitch in there on your machine. I'm going to do that, so I'm just going to take it to the machine and straight stitch one side, trim those threads, and then straight stitch the other side. Shall I just turn that the right way around so you can see that waistband? We're making trousers, guys. We're making trousers. So that's a super comfy elasticated waistband for you. And all that's left to do is to put the cuffs on the hem. So in order to do that, we grab our cuff pieces, we separate them out, we fold them in half with right sides together. If you've made our Zara jumper, you'll recognize this technique from the cuffs for that. And jump back over to a zigzag stitch or an overlocker if you want. And I've just sewn that short edge, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. That's our cuffs ready to go. I'm going to turn these inside out once more. And all I'm going to do is fold these guys in half, like so, until we've got a nice cuff shape like that. Grab the trouser leg. I'm going to match up my seam of my cuff with the inside leg seam on the trouser and pin that in place. And then I'm going to stretch the cuff out slightly to pin it to the other side. Okay, and now we're just going to sew this cuff in, stretching out the cuff ever so gently as we sew. So hopefully you guys can see I'm just gently stretching out the cuff. Beautiful. That is one cuff on, and if I turn it inside the right way round even, you can see. So that's a cuff, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Trimming those excess threads. And that, my friends, is a pair of trousers that we just made together. I hope you loved making them, and I hope you love wearing them. If you're on Instagram and you want to give us a tag, we're at Made My Wardrobe, and then use the little hashtag Margot Trousers so that we can see. It's Margot with a T at the end. And we really hope to see you on another workshop soon to make some more super comfy clothing.